Hello everyone, and as always, welcome back to my channel. Or if it's your first time, welcome to my channel. My name is Marlene and I talk about eating disorder recovery and everything related to healing the relationship with your own body, with food, and with movement. And let's start right into the topic as we always do. I've been going through my notes recently. As you guys know, I work as a recovery coach and I have every client that I have organized in a folder with all the notes, everything we're working with. And of course, I also keep notes of former clients in case somebody wants to come back. And I've been counting and seeing how many clients I've worked with so far. I've probably worked with at least 70 to 100 people one-on-one, and then also worked in groups and so on. And I did want to reflect a little bit on the things I learned as a recovery coach. As you guys know, I am recovered from an eating disorder. And of course, that brought me a lot of learning, a lot of understanding about the topic. But if you work on the other side, you learn a little bit more. I am required to do a certain amount of trainings. I was required to do that when I was working in the clinic. I'm constantly doing more trainings. I work with professionals together. We have certain groups that we work in as professionals. So, between that and also just working with clients one-on-one, there is a lot of learning. And next to or besides the typical ones, of course, recovery is not linear. Of course, one approach might not work for another person if it works for one person. Besides all those things that were already very clear to me in the beginning, over the course of these couple of years that I've been working as a coach, I also learned a lot of things that I probably did not expect in the beginning. And thing number one that I learned, learning number one, is that not everyone has to aim for full recovery yet. When I first started working as a recovery coach, my main goal was to get everyone to full recovery. And I would still say that is my goal, but what I had to learn over time and working with clients in different situations is that maybe full recovery, A, means something different for every person. So my definition of full recovery might be a very different one from somebody else's. And B, sometimes aiming for full recovery it's not the right time yet, or for some people, and this is very, very few people, this might not be the goal to set right now. So understanding that every person has a different goal and that I don't have to push my goal or my idea of full recovery onto someone was very important for me. And at the same time, of course, it's very, very tricky, because between pushing a client and not allowing the eating disorder to stick around for too long and not allowing the eating disorder to negotiate, but also making sure that I'm not pushing my idea of recovery onto someone, that required quite a bit of learning. And I'm still learning, and it's something that I just had to become way more aware of, because it can be a slim line. So to give you an example, a lot of people, as we all know, life happens, and a lot of people try to recover, but they also try to live a life. We all have some role in some capacity. Some of us are, for instance, moms. Some of us are students, family members, partners in relationships. We all have so much going on in our lives. And depending on the situation we're in, but also depending on what we deal with overall mentally and or physically, those approaches and those goals might change. I've worked with people who had, for instance, physical disabilities, and therefore we of course had to approach the whole recovery thing very, very different. I've worked with people who also dealt with a lot of trauma, for instance, and when it comes to trauma, I'm normally making sure that we work interdisciplinary, that they also have, for instance, a trauma therapist, and that we just really make sure to work in a certain pace and to just make sure that we're working on the eating disorder and on trauma. My part is working on the eating disorder, and then the therapist's part is working on the trauma with the client. But things like this just can have an immense impact on someone's definition of full recovery and also on their pace, which is point number 2. When I first started working as a coach, I wanted to just let my clients see results as quick as possible. And same thing here, I still aim for that with most clients, but it is also way, way, way more nuanced. So a lot of clients want to jump right in, and for a lot of clients that also works, but a lot of clients also say, hey, I need smaller steps. And I needed to understand and to really learn those smaller steps is not always the eating disorder negotiating. Again, it is my job as a coach to make sure that we're finding steps that are small enough so that the client is not completely overwhelmed and shuts down, but also big enough so that we're not being stuck. But understanding that, those steps can look different than from, for instance, the steps that I took, but also being honest with myself and saying like, hey, in the beginning of my recovery, I didn't just jump all in. I also needed a certain amount of time to just get used to that. But again, my recovery might look completely different from somebody else's recovery, and that is okay. And again, you can see a big bottom line of all these learnings is that, of course, every person is super individual and every approach is super individual. And there is no right or wrong approach. I mean, there might be wrong approaches to recovery in terms of, what you're focusing on or the way you try to recover, but you still try to restrict and hold on to that and tell yourself you can be recovered while still restricting. But you know what I mean? Like, there are so many different approaches, so many different paces, so many different goals. And that is extremely important, because I don't want to be a person that is just like pushing something onto someone and it might not work for them. I would rather find a solution with them and find a way with them. The third thing I had to learn, and that might be a little bit controversial to some people, is that movement is not always the evil. And hear me out, please. I still support clients who say, like, I do not want to move right now. I want to fully rest. And oftentimes I also tell them, like, we have to take a complete movement break, especially if movement was a big part of their eating disorder. But I also had to understand that maybe, contrary to popular belief, not every form of movement is always bad, or that even if it would have been better to not do that movement, it's just not always fully realistic. Let's say somebody who is a mom, they have to drive their kids around and they have to, be somewhat physically able to play with their kids and to provide for their kids. They have to go grocery shopping. They have to do all those things. They can't just say, I am not moving anymore and I'm just not taking care of my kids anymore. So understand those nuances. On the one hand, understanding that it's sadly not always realistic to completely shut yourself off. And this is my alarm because I'm currently baking brownies. The brownies are looking good. To understand that those things are not always super realistic. We can't just completely stop living at all. A lot of us have some certain responsibilities. And so understanding that, and also understanding that not for every person, every kind of movement is always completely bad. And this is not your allowance to just engage into behaviors again and go out there and move and say, Marlene said. That's not what I'm saying. But again, it is very, 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 very differentiated. And so understanding that, and also understanding that I have to be firm with that on the one side as a coach, but on the other hand, I also can't put myself and on the other hand, I can't put my clients into positions where they have to completely stop living their lives, was very crucial and very, very important. And the next thing I learned that actually I wish I would have known in my own recovery and while working with therapists and coaches and so on when I was in recovery, is that it's not always about fighting an emotion. And you might probably say, well, that's logical. We're not supposed to fight our emotions. Isn't that the whole point? Yes, it is. But I think especially when it comes to anxiety, to fear, to emotions like this, we oftentimes feel like we have to, quote unquote, overcome them, or we have to find a way to make them go away, to decrease the anxiety, to decrease the fear in order to continue. And that is probably something that is keeping most people stuck. I've had a lot of people coming to me that said, I'm always getting to the same point. I am starting recovery. I'm allowing myself more. I'm super motivated. And then at a certain point, I just completely go back, or I just become stuck. And this is oftentimes a sign that we are not focusing enough on tolerating certain emotions. If somebody says, I'm always getting to the same point and then I feel like I'm becoming stuck, that is normally a sign that at this point, something happens. Oftentimes that can have to do with bodily changes, with physical changes, with feeling like I can't handle this weight gain anymore, or I'm afraid of more weight gain, or my anxiety increases because I'm not using my behaviors as much anymore. which of course there are more reasons as to why people can get stuck at specific points, but this is something that I saw over and over again. And it's very important because, again, oftentimes we feel like, okay, I have to immediately fight the anxiety or the fear, which in eating disorder terms normally means going back. I am so afraid, I'm so uncomfortable because I gained weight, so my solution is I have to go back. Your brain is super solution oriented, and the solution of the eating disorder and also on the surface level logical solution sounds like, well, if I'm uncomfortable with my body after gaining weight, I just have to lose that weight again. When the actual answer is, how can I start to tolerate the discomfort? How can I start to tolerate the fear? How can I learn to be anxious and doing it anyway? And I know this might sound completely impossible right now, but I'm telling you, this is an incredible important key to recovery, because if you try to constantly make a fear go away, but you're also avoiding the very thing that creates that fear, then the fear will probably become bigger. The more we avoid something, the more our brain learns this is dangerous. So if you are afraid of gaining more weight, or if you feel so uncomfortable after gaining weight and you immediately go back again, chances are that the fear next time will be bigger again, and your brain will always learn discomfort is bad, so we're fighting it, we're always going back, and we never really learn to tolerate the discomfort. Of course, there's so many more things that I could think of. Let me know in the comments if you want a part 2, as always. Let me know in the comments if anything resonated or was helpful. Let me know which other topics you want me to talk about, and I will see you in the next one.